The town was quiet. Too quiet, in fact. I should have known from the moment I arrived that something was off. A small town in Georgia, miles away from any major city, should have been peaceful, yet there was an unspoken tension in the air. But nothing could prepare me for what I would face as the new police chief, just trying to make a difference in a town where the rules were written by those who didn't follow them. I had just wrapped up my first day on the job. I was eager to get started, hoping to bring a sense of order and professionalism. But the first few hours? It was all charm, handshakes, and fake smiles. The deputy, Kyle Matthews, and his partner Doug Evans, though, didn't seem too thrilled to meet me. The next morning, I decided to explore the town a little. Just a walk, you know? Get a feel for the place. As I strolled down Main Street, I passed a dusty, old cafe that caught my eye. The sound of clinking mugs and quiet chatter filled the air as I stepped inside. The moment I walked in, all conversation seemed to stop. It was one of those awkward silences. My eyes met the locals. Some of them seemed curious, others downright suspicious. At the counter sat Kyle and Doug, making small talk with the bartender. They looked up at me, then exchanged glances. "Don't mind them," the bartender whispered as I ordered a coffee. "They're just used to their own way of doing things here." I nodded, unsure of what she meant. As I sipped my coffee, Kyle looked over and flashed me a grin. "You lost, Chief?" he asked with mock sympathy. Doug chuckled beside him. "Yeah, you look like a man who's never set foot in a real town." I gave a tight smile. "I'm just getting settled in. No need for concern." But the smirk on Kyle's face told me I was anything but welcome. There was something in his eyes, something darker than simple jest. After finishing my coffee, I paid and stepped outside. As soon as I hit the sidewalk, I heard the sound of a car engine. Kyle and Doug's patrol car rolled up beside me. "Need a ride, old man?" Kyle asked, voice dripping with sarcasm. I held up my hand. "I'm fine, just getting some fresh air." "But thanks for asking." Doug, ever the silent partner, only stared out the window. Then Kyle rolled down the window and called out, "Fresh air, huh? You should know, folks here don't take too kindly to outsiders. You might want to remember that." I walked away without another word, but I felt their eyes on my back. Something was brewing beneath the surface. It was more than just a bad vibe. I had crossed the line into their territory. The next day, I decided to go for a jog before heading into the office. I'd been a cop long enough to know that staying in shape was just as important as keeping your mind sharp. But the peaceful jog I'd envisioned quickly turned into something else. Halfway through the run, I heard the roar of an engine approaching. Sure enough, Kyle and Doug pulled up next to me in their patrol car. "Can't stop for a jog?" Kyle called out, leaning out the window. "Or are you just too old for this?" Doug's deep laugh rumbled beside him. I kept running, ignoring them. "Just getting my cardio in." "You should try it sometime," I said, hoping to brush them off. But Kyle wasn't letting it go. "A little too much of a solo show, don't you think?" he shouted. Doug followed up, "Yeah, you're gonna find this town's a little more connected than you might like." They jumped out of the car, their hands grabbing my arms like I was some criminal. "What's the hurry, Chief?" Kyle sneered. Before I could protest, they shoved me against the car, patting me down. No explanation, no asking questions. Just rough handling. "Let's see what you've got under all that fancy gear," Doug muttered as he rifled through my pockets. Kyle laughed, pulling out a business card and waving it in front of my face. "Look at this," he said. "You think you're in charge? I don't care what title they gave you, we're the ones who run this town." I had to force myself not to snap. These two weren't playing by any rules. They were living in a world of their own making. They yanked me toward the center of town, the main square. People watched, murmuring, some laughing, others too afraid to step in. This wasn't just some prank, they were humiliating me in front of everyone. Kyle tied me to the lamp post, his fingers rough as they cinched the rope around my wrists. "Looks like we've got a new addition to the show," he mocked. Doug stepped back with a proud grin, as if he'd just won some twisted game. And then, the crowd. A dozen people, all pulling out their phones, eager to record the spectacle. A few of them smiled as they watched me struggle, others simply turned away. As the seconds turned to minutes, my anger simmered, but I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing it. I knew this was a test, and I was determined not to break. Finally, after what felt like hours, Kyle and Doug untied me. They laughed it off, as if nothing had happened. But I felt the burn in my chest. They didn't just embarrass me, they had crossed a line. The video of my public shaming went viral. By the next morning, it was all anyone could talk about. My phone blew up with calls and messages. My superiors in the department had seen it. They weren't pleased. But they weren't the only ones watching. The town was buzzing with tension. I knew I had to act fast. If I let this slide, it would set a dangerous precedent. Kyle and Doug had underestimated me, and I wasn't going to let them walk away unscathed. I spent the entire next day planning interviews with witnesses, looking over town records, and putting together a case. I wasn't just going to be the new guy anymore. I was going to show the town who was in charge. The next morning, I called an emergency meeting. The station was crowded with local officers, some uncertain, others outright hostile. I could feel the air thick with resistance. But I was resolute. I stood at the front of the room and started with the facts. "Kyle and Doug," I said, looking directly at them, "you've crossed a line. And you will be held accountable for your actions." The room was silent, the tension palpable. Doug fidgeted with his badge, Kyle glared at me. "You can't just come in here and make changes like this," Kyle spat, his voice low but filled with defiance. "I'm not here to make friends, Kyle," I replied coldly. "I'm here to make this department something you're proud of, not to let a couple of bullies drag us down." The room was split, but more and more officers began nodding. I could see them shifting. Kyle and Doug, once untouchable, were losing their grip. I told them the truth, this was a new chapter. The public was watching. The state was watching. And this wouldn't be swept under the rug. It was time to clean house. As the meeting ended, Kyle and Doug didn't say another word. But the looks in their eyes told me everything I needed to know. They knew it was over. The world was changing. Within days, Kyle and Doug were fired. Their badges were taken, their actions documented, and the town began to see what real leadership looked like. The people who had stayed silent now felt empowered to speak up. The ripple effect didn't stop with just them. I made sure to go after every crooked action, every favor and deal that had slipped through the cracks for years. This was bigger than just two officers. This was about restoring respect for the badge. Months passed, but the memory of the moment I took charge never faded. The town had learned something about power, about authority, and about what it really meant to serve and protect.